I was elbow deep in the grease trap of a 24-hour diner when my phone buzzed against my hip. It was 11:51 at night. My hands were slick with old oil and industrial cleaner, but I slid the phone out anyway. It was a notification from the family group chat. A photo. My father, my stepmother, Brenda, my brother Tyler, and my sister Kayla. They were all holding crystal champagne flutes standing on the deck of a yacht I didn't know they had rented. The caption read, "Family First." 2 seconds later, a direct text came through from Brenda. It said, "Don't bother coming for Christmas, Elena. We are done pretending you fit in." I watched the screen as a notification popped up below it. My father had liked the message. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I just wiped my greasy thumb on my apron, stared at the glowing screen, and felt the last bit of warmth I had for them turn into ice. Before we see how they regret that text, drop a comment below telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to see who is awake with us. The screen of my phone was still glowing with the image of my family on their yacht when it vibrated again. A new call. No caller ID. In my life, unknown numbers usually meant debt collectors' overdue tuition reminders or landlords asking why the rent was 3 days late. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something about the timing felt deliberate. It was 11:52, exactly 60 seconds after my stepmother had cut me out of the family. I wiped my thumb on my apron again and swiped answer. "Is this Elena?" The voice was deep, smooth, and expensive. It sounded like the kind of voice that billed by the hour. "Speaking," I said, my voice flat. I wasn't in the mood to be polite to a telemarketer. "Turn around, Elena. Look at booth 4. My stomach dropped. I slowly turned my back on the grease trap and looked out into the dining area. The diner was mostly empty at this hour, populated only by a few truckers and insomniacs nursing cold coffee. But in booth 4, sitting upright with perfect posture, was a man who looked like he had taken a wrong turn on his way to a boardroom. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, and his hair was a perfect silver mane. He was holding a phone to his ear, looking directly at me. I hung up and walked over. My sneakers squeaked on the linoleum. I was conscious of the smell coming off me, stale fryer oil, bleach, and exhaustion. I stopped at the edge of his table. "Who are you?" I asked. I didn't ask it with fear. I asked it with the exhaustion of someone who had nothing left to steal. He didn't stand up. He just gestured to the vinyl seat opposite him. "Sit down, Elena. My name is Arthur Sterling. I was your grandmother Beatrice's personal attorney for 30 years. I remained standing. My grandmother died 6 months ago. My father told me there was nothing left. He said she died in debt." Mr. Sterling smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a sharp, predatory smile, the kind a shark gives before it bites. "Your father says a lot of things, Elena. Most of them are expensive lies." He reached into a briefcase next to him and pulled out a thick, heavy leather portfolio. He slid it across the sticky table. It looked alien against the chipped formica. "What is this?" I asked. "This," he said, "is the truth. Beatrice knew exactly what would happen when she passed. She knew your father was weak. She knew your stepmother was cruel. And she knew that tonight they would finally feel confident enough to cut you off completely." He tapped the leather cover. "She gave me strict instructions. I was to wait until they made their move, until they proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that they did not consider you family." I looked down at the folder. My hands were shaking just slightly. "Open it," Sterling said softly. I flipped the heavy cover. Inside wasn't just a will. It was a dossier, bank statements, property deeds. And right on top a letter addressed to me in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. "I thought she forgot about me," I whispered. Sterling shook his head. "She watched you every day. She knew about the nursing school tuition you were struggling to pay. She knew about this diner. She knew about the car that breaks down every other week." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "She didn't leave you nothing, Elena. She left you everything. But she didn't just leave you money. She left you the receipt." I stared at him, trying to process the words. Sterling checked his watch. It was midnight. "Merry Christmas, Elena. You are no longer the poor relation. You are the creditor, and it is time to collect." I picked up the envelope. It was thick, creamy paper, the kind you buy at a stationery store when you want your words to last forever. My name was written on the front in blue ink, shaky but determined. I recognized the loop of the L immediately. It was the only birthday card I used to get. Growing up, slipped to me in secret before Brenda could throw it away. I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out the letter. Sterling sat silently watching me, his hands folded on the table like a guardian statue. My dearest Elena, the letter began. If you are reading this, then I am gone and Sterling has finally judged that the time is right. I am sorry I had to leave you in the dark for so long, but sometimes truth is a weapon that can only be wielded when the enemy has exposed their throat. I took a breath. The diner sounds, the clatter of plates, the hum of the refrigerator faded into a dull buzz. For 22 years, your father and Brenda have told you a story. They told you that your mother was an addict. They told you she was unstable, that she left us because she chose a high over her own child. They used that story to make you feel small. They used it to justify why they treated you like a stain on their perfect carpet. They told you that the bad blood ran in your veins. I felt a lump form in my throat. That story had been the soundtrack of my childhood. You're just like her, Brenda would sneer whenever I cried. Broken, just like your junkie mother. It was a lie, Elena. A cruel, calculated lie, woven by a jealous woman and signed by a cowardly man. Your mother, Sarah, was not an addict. She was a pediatric nurse. She was the kindest soul I ever knew. She did not leave you. She died shielding you. When you were 2 years old, there was an electrical fire in the apartment. She had a clear path to the door, Elena. She could have walked out without a scratch. Instead, she ran back into the nursery. She wrapped her body around yours. She took the smoke and the heat so that you wouldn't have to. The firefighters found you unharmed beneath her. She didn't abandon you. She gave her life to ensure you had one. I put the letter down. My hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled against the table. I wasn't unwanted. I was saved. I looked up at Sterling. Read the next paragraph, he said softly. It is the part you need to understand the most. I looked back down. You have always wondered why Brenda hated you so much. You thought it was because you were difficult or messy or unlovable. Elena, look at the photograph in the folder. I dug into the leather portfolio and pulled out a glossy 4x6 photo. It was a woman laughing, holding a baby. She had dark hair, high cheekbones, and eyes that were shaped exactly like mine. I was looking at a mirror. Brenda didn't hate you because of who you were, Grandma wrote. She hated you because every time she looked at you, she saw Sarah. You are your mother's carbon copy. You are the ghost in the room. You were the living, breathing reminder of the woman your father loved first and loved best. Brenda could never compete with a ghost, so she tried to break the mirror. And your father, my son, he was too weak to stop her. He sacrificed his daughter to keep the peace with his new wife. He let them punish you for the crime of having your mother's face. I stared at the woman in the photo. For my entire life I had walked around apologizing for my existence. I had made myself small. I had accepted the scraps from their table because I thought I was lucky they fed me at all. I thought I was the problem. But I wasn't the problem. I was the proof. I wasn't punished for being bad. I was punished for being beautiful in a way that terrified them. I put the photo down on top of the letter. The sadness that had been pooling in my chest for years began to evaporate. In its place, something harder and colder began to solidify. It felt like steel. Sterling leaned forward. Do you understand now, Elena? They didn't cast you out because you were worthless. I looked at the lawyer. My eyes were dry. I understand, I said. Good, Sterling said. Because the rest of this file contains the financial records of exactly how much money they have spent trying to fill the void that your mother left behind. And let me tell you, Elena, they spent a lot. He tapped the portfolio. Tomorrow morning we go to the house. It is time to introduce the ghost to the landlords. Mr. Sterling had given me one specific instruction before I drove to the house. Let them speak, he had said. Arrogance is a balloon, Elena. It pops loudest when it is overinflated. I pulled my rusting sedan up the long paved driveway of the Whitehaven estate. My brakes squealed, a sharp, ugly sound that cut through the manicured silence of the neighborhood. The house loomed ahead, a sprawling mock Tudor mansion that screamed new money. In the driveway sat a brand-new pearl-white luxury SUV with a red bow still attached to the grille. I parked behind it, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. I hadn't changed out of my diner uniform. I still smelled like bacon grease and dish soap. Sterling had offered me time to change, but I refused. I wanted them to see exactly who they were throwing away. I walked up the front steps. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open. It was Tyler. He was wearing a polo shirt that cost more than my weekly tips. "Did we order takeout?" he asked, looking over my shoulder for a delivery bag. "Oh, it's just you." He didn't move to let me in. I stepped past him. Inside the house smelled of fresh paint and expensive lilies. Brenda was standing in the foyer directing two workmen who were hanging a massive abstract painting. "Careful with the frame," she snapped. Then she saw me. Her face didn't soften. It just tightened, like she had smelled something rotting. "Elena, I thought my text was clear. We have a very important meeting today. We don't have time for your drama." "I'm not here for drama, Brenda," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here for the meeting." She laughed. A short, sharp bark. "This is a legal meeting, honey. About the estate. It doesn't concern you. But since you're here, look." She swept her arm toward the back of the house. Through the sliding glass doors I could see the backyard. The old wooden deck was gone. In its place was a sprawling stone patio, an outdoor kitchen, and a sparkling in-ground pool with a waterfall feature. $50,000, she said, her eyes gleaming with a manic sort of pride. "We finished it last week. And the kitchen," she tapped the marble island we were standing next to. $40,000, imported directly from Italy." "You spent a lot of money," I said quietly. Brenda smirked. "We're investing in our future. Beatrice would have wanted us to enjoy her legacy. Besides, once the wire transfer hits this afternoon, this will all be paid off in seconds." My father Robert walked in from the living room. He was wearing a new suit, but he looked uncomfortable. When he saw me, he didn't say hello. He just looked at his shoes. "You shouldn't be here, Elena," he mumbled. "It's..." "Awkward for who, Dad?" I asked. "For you," Kayla said, walking down the stairs. She was scrolling on her phone, barely looking up. "We're about to be millionaires, Elena. And you're you. It's embarrassing. Go back to the diner." I looked at them. Really looked at them. For years their words would have cut me open. I would have begged for a crumb of affection. I would have apologized for being poor, for being an inconvenience. But today, standing in their $40,000 kitchen, I didn't feel pain. I felt the cold, hard clarity of an accountant looking at a bad audit. They weren't a family. They were a sinkhole. They had spent money they didn't have, banking on a dead woman they barely visited to impress neighbors who didn't care. The doorbell rang. "That's Mr. Sterling," Brenda said, clapping her hands. Her eyes lit up with greed. "Finally!" She turned to me, her voice dripping with venom. "You can stay and watch if you want, Elena, but stand in the corner, and try not to get grease on the new furniture." I walked to the corner of the room and leaned against the wall. I crossed my arms over my apron. "Okay," I said, "I'll watch." Mr. Sterling walked into the living room like he owned the air inside it. He didn't shake my father's hand. He didn't accept the glass of sparkling water Brenda offered. He simply walked to the center of the room, placed his briefcase on the new marble coffee table, and snapped the latches open. The sound was like a gunshot in a canyon. My family sat on the new beige sectional sofa, leaning forward like hungry dogs waiting for a bone. I stayed in the corner, leaning against the wall, invisible. "Well," Brenda said, her voice tight with excitement. "Let's get to the good part, Arthur. When does the transfer hit?" Sterling ignored her. He pulled out a document, put on a pair of reading glasses, and looked over the rims at them. "Before we discuss the distribution of assets," he said, his voice dry as dust, "we must review the liabilities. Based on the receipts I have collected and the credit checks I ran this morning, you have spent quite aggressively in the last 6 months." He looked down at the paper. One pearl white luxury SUV. $78,000. Financed at 12% interest. My father shifted uncomfortably. We assumed we could pay cash once the will settled." Sterling continued, relentless. "One kitchen renovation. $40,000. One pool and patio complex. $50,000. Designer wardrobes, vacations, and general lifestyle inflation. $36,000. He took off his glasses and looked at Robert. "In total, you have spent $204,000 in anticipation of this inheritance. You have maxed out your credit cards and leveraged your home equity to the hilt. You spent a fortune you did not have." "It's not a fortune we don't have," Brenda snapped, her smile faltering. "It is a fortune we are about to get. Just read the will, Arthur." Sterling put his glasses back on. "Very well." He picked up a heavy sheet of parchment. "To my grandchildren Tyler and Kayla." Tyler sat up straighter. Kayla put down her phone. "I leave the sum of $6,000 each." The room went dead silent. 6,000, Tyler repeated. You mean 600,000? 6,000, Sterling corrected. Specifically, Beatrice labeled these funds as appearance fees. She calculated the hourly rate of a minimum wage worker and multiplied it by the number of hours you spent visiting her in the hospital. She wanted to make sure you were fairly compensated for your time. Kayla's mouth dropped open. That's insulting. Sterling turned the page. To my son, Robert, and his wife, Brenda. Brenda gripped Robert's knee. Her knuckles were white. I leave nothing. 0. Brenda stood up. That's a lie. She can't do that. We are her family. Sit down, Mrs. Caldwell, Sterling said. His voice wasn't loud, but it slammed her back into her seat. I am not finished. He turned to the final page. To my granddaughter, Elena. My father's head snapped toward me in the corner. Brenda froze. I leave the remainder of my estate, including my investment portfolio, my cash reserves, and my intellectual property rights. A total liquid value of $2,500,000. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of oxygen leaving a room. Brenda looked at me then, back at Sterling, then back at me. Her face was turning a patchy violent red. 2 million, my father whispered. Sterling closed the folder with a soft thud. The money has already been transferred to a trust in Elena's name. It is done. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The air in the room felt pressurized like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks. Then Brenda exploded. It wasn't a normal shout. It was a guttural scream that seemed to tear out of her throat. She leaped up from the sofa, her face twisted into something unrecognizable. This is fraud. She pointed a trembling finger at Sterling, then whipped around to point at me. You manipulated her. You poisoned her against us. She was senile. We'll contest it. We'll sue you until you don't have a dime left. She was pacing now, frantic, knocking over a vase of lilies. Water spilled across the expensive hardwood floor, but she didn't notice. Robert, call the police. She's stealing our money. That money belongs to us. We bought the car. We built the pool. It's ours. My father was sitting with his head in his hands, rocking slightly. He looked gray. We can't pay for it, he whispered. Brenda. We can't pay for any of it. Shut up, Robert, Brenda shrieked. She turned on me, marching across the room until she was inches from my face. I could smell the expensive perfume mixed with the sour sweat of panic. You think you won? You think you can just walk in here with your grease stains and take everything? Get out of my house. Sterling didn't flinch. He watched Brenda's meltdown with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a lab rat. He cleared his throat. Actually, Mrs. Caldwell, that brings us to the final item of business. Brenda spun around her chest, heaving. What else could you possibly take from us? Sterling opened a separate, thinner file. He pulled out a document stamped with the bank's logo. Beatrice predicted this, he said calmly. She called it your inevitable collapse. She knew that once you believed the money was coming, you would spend recklessly to fill the emotional void in your lives. She knew you would refinance this house to buy things you didn't need. He slid the document across the coffee table toward my father. 6 months ago, the bank bundled your new high-risk mortgage and sold it. Beatrice bought it through a shell company. My father looked up, his eyes glassy. What? What does that mean? It means, Sterling said, his voice ice cold, that the bank doesn't hold the deed to this house anymore. Beatrice transferred ownership of the note to Elena. He pointed at me. Elena isn't just the beneficiary of the will. She is the holder of your mortgage. And according to my records, you are 90 days past due. Brenda stopped screaming. She looked at the walls of the living room, then at the ceiling, as if the house itself was suddenly rejecting her. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto the wet floor right into the puddle of spilled flower water. She owns the house, Tyler whispered. She owns the debt, Sterling corrected, and she has the right to foreclose immediately. Brenda looked up at me from the floor. The arrogance was gone. The anger was gone. In its place was sheer, naked terror. The narcissist's mask had shattered, and underneath was just a frightened woman who had gambled everything on a lie and lost. She owns us, my father whispered. Sterling looked at me. It's your call, Elena. What do you want to do? The room was silent, save for the sound of Brenda weeping softly into the puddle of water on the floor. My father looked up at me, his eyes red and desperate. Elena, please, he stammered. You can't. You can't throw us out. This is our home. We raised you here. You didn't raise me, Dad, I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the anger I thought I would feel. You stored me here, like an unwanted piece of furniture you couldn't figure out how to return. Brenda looked up, her mascara running in dark streaks down her face. We're family, she croaked. You can't treat family like this. Family, I repeated, testing the word. It felt foreign. You told me last night that I wasn't family. You told me to take the hint. Well, I'm taking it. This isn't a family matter anymore, Brenda. It's a business transaction. I looked at Sterling. Do you have the eviction papers ready? Sterling reached into his briefcase. I have them right here. Notice to vacate in 72 hours. My father made a sound like a wounded animal. We have nowhere to go, he whispered. The credit cards are maxed. We have no cash. If you kick us out, we're homeless. I watched them crumble. It would have been easy to sign the paper. It would have been satisfying to watch the sheriff drag them out, to see the neighbors watch their humiliation. But that was too quick. That was a mercy they didn't deserve. I don't want to evict you, I said. Hope flickered in Brenda's eyes. She sat up straighter. No, I said. I looked around the expensive living room at the high ceilings and the custom drapes. I want this asset to perform. I want a return on my investment. I walked over to the marble island and placed my hand on the cool stone. I'm offering you a lease. A lease? Tyler asked, confused. You can stay, I said. You can keep the house. You can keep the pool. You can keep pretending to the neighbors that you are the wealthy owners of the Whitehaven estate. My father let out a breath of relief. Thank you, Elena. Thank God. I knew you. But I interrupted, cutting him off with a sharp look. You will stay as my tenants. You will sign a standard 12-month lease. You will pay full market rent. Sterling, what is the market rate for a property of this size in this zip code? Sterling didn't even check his notes. $8,500 a month, plus utilities and landscaping maintenance. I nodded. $8,500, due on the 1st. If you are late by a single day, the eviction notice gets filed. My father's face went white again. Elena, we can't afford that. We don't have that kind of income. Then I suggest you sell the boat, I said coldly. And the SUV. And maybe Tyler and Kayla can get jobs. I hear the diner is hiring for the graveyard shift. Brenda stood up, shaking. You're humiliating us. You're trapping us in our own house. I'm giving you a choice, Brenda. I leaned in close so she could see her own fear reflected in my eyes. You can leave today with nothing and everyone will know you failed. Or you can stay and pay me for the privilege of living in the shrine you built for yourselves. You can wear the golden handcuffs. She looked at Robert. She looked at the expensive furniture she couldn't bear to part with. She looked at the life she had crafted so carefully to impress people she hated. We'll sign, she whispered. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a landlord who just secured a high-yield tenant. Good, I said. Sterling has the paperwork. First and last month's rent is due now. I'll take a check. I didn't slam the heavy oak door on my way out. I closed it quietly. There was no need for noise. The silence I left behind was heavy enough. I walked down the stone steps and sat in the driver's seat of my rusting sedan. The engine sputtered when I turned the key, a familiar sound that usually made my stomach tighten with anxiety. Today it just sounded like nostalgia. I patted the dashboard. One last ride, I whispered. I didn't drive home. I drove to a quiet spot overlooking the city and pulled out my phone. I dialed the number for the nursing school's bursar office. This is Elena Caldwell, I said when the clerk answered. I'd like to pay my outstanding tuition balance. Of course, she said. How much would you like to pay today? All of it, I said. I gave her the routing number for the trust account Sterling had set up. When she confirmed the payment was processed, I felt a physical weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since I was 18. My next stop was the cemetery. The grass around Grandma Beatrice's headstone was frost-covered and brown. I brushed off a few dead leaves and placed the copy of the lease agreement against the cold granite. They signed it, Grandma, I said softly. You were right. They chose the cage. I stood there for a long time, not crying, just breathing. She hadn't just given me money. She had given me the truth. She had given me my mother's face back. She had turned the ghost in the room into the woman in charge. Thank you, I whispered. I walked back to the car. Before I put it in gear, I opened my contacts list one last time. I scrolled past the names that had defined my trauma for 2 decades. Dad. Brenda. Tyler. Kayla. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel hate. I just felt clean. I tapped edit, then delete contact. I did it 4 times. 4 clicks. 4 ties severed. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and pulled onto the highway. The road ahead was wide open, and for the first time in my life, I could afford to go anywhere I wanted. If you had the power to make your bullies pay you rent, would you do it, or would you just kick them out? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe the truth always wins, hit that like button,